The entire globe is today the site of a momentous conflict. As each side attempts to prove to the world the superiority of its position, the conflict is fought with the words of diplomats, with gestures of friendship and help to uncommitted countries, even with cultural demonstrations. It is fought indeed on every level of man's experience, for the stakes are high. As one of the adversaries in the conflict, we see a challenge as great as any in our historic past. A challenge not, we hope, to be met and joined in battle, but to be faced and fought in the hearts and hopes of men. It is the challenge of ideas.
But they referred to each other as brothers. So these existential Borg run into Lore, and Lore is like, you guys are a mess. I'm in charge now. I'm your dad. And like he just runs the collective, but they're like bandits, right? Instead of like trying to assimilate everybody, they just rob everybody or whatever. You know, they attack everybody. And then the Enterprise, because they're the only people who do anything apparently, find Lore and Hugh and these existential Borg, and they have to there's a conflict. It's another 2-part episode. So it wasn't Locutus who went back and messed with their minds. It was Hugh who went back and messed with their minds.
I forgot what topic we were discussing.
Yeah. Why don't we introduce the show, and then we'll introduce the topic.
Oh well. Good morrow. My name is Nima Ashtiani.
And you're listening to Jurisfiction. My name is Adam Kirshner. Jurisfiction is basically a conversation about whether real laws apply to fictional characters or circumstances. And our topic this week relates to the new Star Trek movie coming out on July 22nd, Star Trek Beyond. And although our topic is not directly related to the Kirk, Spock, et al. Crew, it is a question about whether when Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise identified himself to the crew of the Starship Enterprise as Locutus of Borg, did he commit fraud?
So I guess we have to figure out first, what is fraud?
Sure. Okay, so we can do fraud, and then we'll do a little bit of the facts, and then we can...
Now, just so we're clear, you're saying
frog
protection,
right?
Frog protection.
Little green... amphibians.
And yes, we are talking about the same thing. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Fraud protection. So fraud is the intentional misrepresentation or concealment or omission of a material fact upon which the victim or victims rely or relies, causing injury in fact to the victim or victims.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go through a couple of the facts, and then I guess we can apply the facts to the law of fraud.
So why don't we go into a little bit of what is... Well, so
what are the Borg, and how did they capture Picard, and then what were the circumstances under which Picard identified himself?
Right. So the Borg. Now, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong. The Borg is are a group of people from the outskirts of Sweden. Is that correct?
Yeah, from Sweden in the Delta Quadrant, and they've been traveling around the universe for a millennium, right? I think it's like 15th century on Earth is whenever they started out in the Delta Quadrant. Basically, like they're strongly motivated by combining biological entities and technology, right? Like whenever they show up, they have this whole like shtick. We are the Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile, and then they take over everything and assimilate everything. That's the raison d'etre, right? It's like let's just put everything together. And so they've been doing it for a millennium. And in the 24th century, right, they come across the Enterprise a couple of times. And in this circumstance, I think they penetrate the shields of the Enterprise, and they just board the bridge, and they go to the captain, and then they like transport back to the Borg ship with the captain, right? Like they specifically targeted Jean-Luc Picard, and they abducted him. and return to the ship.
Right.
And so the Enterprise crew freak out, understandably, right? Like, oh my God, they just took the captain.
Is that
And
would that be your level of freak out if your captain was taken?
it would probably be a little bit higher than that. I'm toning it down for the purposes of our podcast.
It did feel benign.
Yeah. Yeah, so they freak out a lot more than I was freaking out. The Borg just took our captain. What do we do now? So a little while later, so basically Skype is really big in the 24th century, right? Like anytime like two ships get in close proximity, their first move is to start Skyping, right? Like, right? And they judge everybody who do not have Skype capability, right? Like they don't have a monitor, Captain, right? Like they don't have a webcam. We can't Skype with them. It's audio only.
Do they have like a...
And then Picard, like...
when they... So you mentioned before that the Borg add biological and technological distinctiveness to their own. Do they have a distinctive ringtone, perhaps?
Yeah, actually they do. It's so they speak in unison. It's like a bunch of them like talking all at once. That's their distinctive ringtone. And also, like, speaking of like Skype protocol, when you Skype with the Borg, basically you Skype with like their exterior of their ship, right? Like whatever, right? Like until Picard was abducted, they wouldn't turn on their webcam, right? Like you were just Skyping with like the outside of their ship.
It's like looking out your window and seeing their ship and being like, can we talk to you? You are talking. Can we do this face to face? No.
This is our face.
We are a big cubicle giant war machine.
Yeah. So Picard's abduction changed everything with regard to Skyping with the Borg, right? Like suddenly
they got into selfies.
Now they turn their webcam on and you talk with an individual. And so so the captain is abducted. The Borg take him back to the big Borg cube. And a little while later, the Borg want to Skype with the crew of the Enterprise. And so Riker, the first officer, Commander Riker at that time, said, "Great, let's Skype," right? So it's Riker Skyping with the person who used to be Jean Luc Picard. He used to, every time he would Skype with somebody, he would be like, "This is Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise." Like that. He would identify himself that way.
That's a good way to identify yourself.
If you are Captain
You are.
of the Starship Enterprise. So they're Skyping. It's, "Hi, this is Commander Riker. Hi, I am Locutus of Borg."
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Awkward. Remember when I used to be your captain? Not so much, right? So the issue is when Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise, who I think just moments earlier had identified himself to the Borg as, "Hi everybody, I'm Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise." Now all of a sudden, he's identifying himself to the crew of the Enterprise. "What's up everybody, I'm Locutus of Borg." Was that a misrepresentation of a material fact? Was it intentional? Did the crew rely on that representation? And were the crew injured by that?
So I guess we'd have to start with, is Locutus the personality or the name that he's giving them? Is that
Picard or is that the Borg?
right.
Because like the Borg are always like talking as a collective, right? We are the Borg.
But not him. He was all about I, me, a little selfish.
Right.
Totally not one of us being them. But to his credit, they were listening to him. They were like, "Let's do what this guy says. He seems to know stuff," right?
Yeah, so the Borg, I guess, would not contest that he is of Borg, right? They wanted that. And he, Picard, did not appear to... I mean, so he was a prisoner, but they started modifying him, and at the point in time whenever he identified himself as Locutus of Borg, he did not seem to be under duress, right? So it seemed to have been a voluntary representation.
Well, I don't know about not duress. I mean, they did brandish him in leather and cords coming out of his face and body.
Yeah.
Some people might find that...
Oh, there was duress at some point, right? But at the point in time when he identified himself as Locutus of Borg, nobody was holding a gun to his head.
No.
Right? He had already assimilated. And how long it actually takes to begin to assimilate.
Right. In fact, they gave him a gun.
Issue. They gave him like a thing on his hand.
Yeah.
I don't know if he had a gun.
Not a gun, but the ship. They gave him the ship.
Right. They gave him the Borg cube with all of its weaponry.
Yeah.
It's bigger than
it's a nice welcoming gift.
Yeah. We got you a spaceship. So, all right. So he represented himself as Locutus of Borg. Mm-hmm. Is that a true representation of his identity, or is that a misrepresentation of his identity?
Well, he had always been Jean Luc Picard, and then later on in life became Captain Jean Luc Picard. You know, you
Well, I mean, he was probably lieutenant or something at some point, right? Like,
yeah.
but yeah, like he became at some point the
I
captain.
skipped a couple steps in the middle, but he was always Jean Luc Picard. His Social Security card, which I assume they still have then, probably reads Jean Luc Picard. So if Locutus is walking around, well, if Jean Luc is walking around as Locutus, and he still has his wallet on him, and that wallet still says, still has a Social Security card, which, by the way, don't ever carry a Social Security card in your wallet, says Jean Luc Picard on it. I think it's safe to say that Jean Luc Picard is pretending to be someone else.
So this depends on what was in Locutus of Borg's pockets.
I guess the question would be, it's like Samuel Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson asks in those commercials, "What's in your wallet?" And if it's Jean-Luc Picard's Social Security card or his spaceship flying license, there's a good chance that Locutus of Borg is a misrepresentation.
Sure, right, but I guess we can reach that conclusion a different way, right? Like, what if the process for there was no process actually for establishing an individual identity among the Borg, right? It was unprecedented, right? There was no so and so of Borg, right? Like prior to that point, they were just like designations of subgroups, right?
Well,
third of five,
right, but
seven of nine,
there
something like
there is
that.
that queen, the Borg queen. She would be.
Oh, but that was after the fact. She did not exist
At that time,
prior
of
to.
the showing of that show, no. But
Right.
later on, they determined that she was there prior. Does that make?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That was part of the movie.
that was part of the, she. So they do flash. One of the movies, like one of the, I think it's the First Contact movie. He has flashbacks when he sees the Borg Queen and realizes as Locutus he had seen her before. So she was the. We learn later that she's the one that's been running the show.
Okay. So maybe it was not so unprecedented. Right? So if he filed whatever documents he has to file to get his identity, like Locutus of Borg, properly with the Queen or whomever, and he was properly designated Locutus of Borg,
Mm-hmm.
well that would be a true representation as far as the Borg are concerned.
Sure.
But is it untrue to represent himself as Locutus of Borg to the crew of the Enterprise when, in fact, he was Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise?
Well, it would probably be determined on how he's known in the Federation, and the way they know him
Right.
is as Jean-Luc Picard. I probably have to say that they would not recognize Locutus of Borg as a legal identity for him.
No, as far as I would say that as far as the Federation is concerned,
Mm-hmm.
when Captain Picard was abducted by the Borg, he was a prisoner of war, and so any identification that he makes of himself, other than Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise, and I assume he has some sort of serial number or something, that would also be like cognizable by the Federation. Any identity that is inconsistent with that would be a misrepresentation, insofar as the Federation is concerned.
Although, there is something to be said for the fact that they, ran tubes and wires through him and changed his brain and connected it with the Borg group that made him believe he was Locutus. So when he was telling them, "I am Locutus," it may not be a lie, because a lie tends to be you're deliberately saying something that's false, and he really believed that thing. So I guess there's always a possibility that when they induct, what's the word that you use? Induct, not induct.
Assimilate?
Assimilate? That's better. That sounds a little more
That's the
appropriate.
word that they use.
That's the word yeah. We'll go with their word. When they assimilate someone, they strip them of the identity they were known as, and it's kind of like a rebirth, if you will. So perhaps Locutus was not so much misrepresenting. Maybe he really was just Locutus at that point. You're person A through your whole life. You meet the Borg, you become person B, because your brain has now changed that thing. Like perhaps like amnesia or multiple personality disorder.
So prior to his abduction, he was Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise, and following his abduction, he was Locutus of Borg. It was a true statement at that time. That's what you're saying.
At the time he made it, it was a true statement.
Well, maybe, right? Let's keep going with the analysis, and we'll see if it was true after all.
Okay.
Let's just assume, for the time being, that it was a misrepresentation, because if we don't, then our analysis stops. Was it an intentional misrepresentation? He knowingly stated, "I am Locutus of Borg," right?
But did he knowingly state that as Jean-Luc Picard?
Did he know that he was Jean-Luc Picard whenever he stated that he was Locutus of Borg?
That is a much better way to say what I was trying to say, thank you. I think that goes back to what I was explaining before that. He's Jean-Luc Picard, he meets the Borg, they put some stuff into his brain,
Yeah.
and then, oops, no more Jean-Luc. We tampered with the brain. We've created amnesia and implanted a new brain, or we've created a new mind for him. So when he identifies himself to his own ship as Locutus, clearly this is a fact-sensitive question, but you'd have to, and the determination is, did he know that he was not who he said he was? It appeared he did not know who he said he was, because given what we know about Jean-Luc Picard, and that he as Locutus used the Borg ship to destroy many other Federation ships, I'm under the impression he would not do that. Seems like a stand-up guy, you know? Therefore, not an intentional misrepresentation.
Look, just because you start referring to yourself in a different way, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you tell someone, "Call me Bozo the Clown from now on," but nothing is different, right? Just because you adopt a nickname does not change who your actual name is, right?
True, that's right.
Right. Let's take this in isolation. If you told me I am Locutus of Borg, I would say, no, you're not Locutus of Borg. You're Nima, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now let's add a bunch of Borg. The Borg took you, and then you told me I am Locutus of Borg.
Okay.
I would still say, well, no, you're Nima. You're not Locutus of Borg.
Right.
And although let's assume you would believe that you are Locutus of Borg when you tell me you are Locutus of Borg, you still are the person that you were born as, right? And the Federation did not relinquish the designation of Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise. They promoted Riker to captain whenever the man who they thought was Captain Jean Luc Picard informed them, guess what, I'm not Captain Jean Luc Picard anymore. Right? So that goes to reliance by the victims. And it goes to the materiality of the captain's identity, right? Mm-hmm. It mattered who the captain of the ship was. And they relied on the representation that he was no longer their captain. And they promoted Riker, and they attacked the Borg ship and got the captain back. But all the while, the Federation believed that the true identity of that individual was Captain Jean-Luc Picard. That's why they tried to rescue him, and succeeded. They succeeded in rescuing him and resuming his identity as Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise. So, although the individual, we'll assume, believed that representation to be true when he made it, I'm Locutus now of Borg, not Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise. That doesn't necessarily. It's still not a true statement insofar as the Federation is concerned.
Right, but he may not know it's not a true statement at the time that he made it.
Well, the Borg knew, or should have known, that it was not true, right? The Borg specifically abducted him.
Yes.
They targeted Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise. They abducted him,
mm-hmm.
and they assimilated and otherwise modified him. I'm not sure who named him Locutus. Maybe he came up with it. Maybe they told him that's the name that you should use. But they knew it was a material fact who the captain of the ship was. They knew it was a material fact who he was, right? They chose to use him to speak to the crew of the Enterprise.
Right.
And they knew, the Borg, they knew or should have known that he was not Locutus of Borg. They wanted him to be Locutus of Borg. That's why they abducted him. But he was not. He was Captain Jean Luc Picard.
And what they wanted really didn't matter. You're right. He was still who he was before, even though he didn't know it. However, I think we discussed this a little bit before we started doing the show. There was a time when Picard did hold himself out to be Locutus of Borg, intentionally knowing that to be false.
After the fact.
After the fact. He was made back into Jean-Luc Picard, and then there was a Borg. I think they captured a Borg, or somehow he was talking to a Borg. Hey guys, remember me?
Yeah, you're right. I think that was the point, right? Like so Geordi named their captive Borg Hugh, and I think you're right. I think so. Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise goes down and he talks to the captured Borg, and he tries to scare the captured Borg. He's like, "I'm Locutus of Borg," right? Like he held himself as Locutus of Borg when in fact he was Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise. I think we can agree that was fraud, right? That was a misrepresentation of a material fact.
Yeah, and he was doing it to try to induce something from Hugh.
Right. Well, I would say that not only was that fraud, identifying himself as Locutus of Borg when he in fact was Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise, I would also say that regardless of what he believed to be true under the influence of the Borg Collective, regardless of that, when he identified himself as Locutus of Borg to the crew of the Starship Enterprise, I would argue that was not in fact his identity. He was still Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise.
I agree. The whole time he was one person. He was manipulated. He was kidnapped, brainwashed, and led to believe that he was someone he wasn't. But that didn't change who he really was. That just means that the Borg Collective committed numerous crimes, like I said, such as kidnapping.
So then the liability goes to the Borg.
The liability goes to the Borg.
For the fraud.
Yes. And in fact, if in using that fraud, that misrepresentation, I am Locutus of Borg, something was that induced someone to do something they normally wouldn't do. Like, for example, when Jean-Luc was talking to Hugh and said, I am Locutus of Borg, I want you to do this thing. If someone was led to do something they normally wouldn't do, except for the fact that this person held himself out to be Locutus of Borg, in the case of Hugh, Jean-Luc would be responsible because he knowingly did it. In the case of when he was actually, taken over by the Borg and acting as Locutus, the Borg may have liability under fraud.
Right. Not so much Jean-Luc Picard when he identified himself as Locutus of Borg to the crew of the Enterprise, but the Borg would have liability.
Yes.
Because they knew or should have known that he was not Locutus of Borg. He was Captain Jean Luc Picard of the Starship Enterprise. He just told them that, right? Whenever they were Skyping, right? They knew or should have known he's not Locutus of Borg.
And then it makes you wonder, when you Skype with someone, usually they're in your contacts list. When his distinct dial tone comes up on Skype, does it come up as Locutus, or did he change it, or did it come up as Jean-Luc?
Probably didn't have time to set that all up. I mean, I don't know what the IT department of the Borg ship is like. You'd think that they would be like on top of that though, because of their whole technological distinctiveness issue.
Right.
But maybe you had to put in like a work order. Like who knows what the backlog is in the Borg ship. There's probably a lot of IT issues on the Borg ship.
I know, a lot of wires.
Yeah.
Run a new line. I mean, it's
all functional. It's not really
aesthetic.
Aesthetic, no.
Yeah. Well, all right. Another problem solved by jurisfiction.
Fantastic. Why don't you let us know what you think? If you disagree with our analysis, let us know. Twitter.com @jurisfiction1, Facebook.com/jurisfiction, Instagram.com/jurisfiction.
And if you have any other topics you'd like us to discuss, if you can think of anything else that you've seen on Star Trek and ever wonder, was that legal? Well, we'd like to know what you think. Let us know and we'll do our research and hopefully bring it up in a future topic.
Thanks for listening.